Okay, greetings to the participants of the Ending Age-Related Diseases 2021. This conference brings together thought leaders and researchers working on rejuvenation biotechnology with the goal of extending healthy human life. The path towards healthy longevity for all is not an easy one. Nobody has a secret sauce available that will ensure success in the short term. There is no proven strategy because humanity has not done that before. This is a unique medical and social project, and what we are witnessing is actually unprecedented. But what we can do is look at the experience from other fields introducing innovations and try to distill particular approaches, toolkits, and skill sets that will increase our chances of succeeding. And today I'm speaking about it with Allison Duettmann, the president of the Foresight Institute, a nonprofit advancing biotech, nanotech, computing, and other modern technologies for improving human life. Hi, Allison, how are you?
Hi, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
So I wanted to begin our discussion with a question about your project, existentialhope.com. Could you please share what pushed you to start working in this direction, and what do you mean by existential hope?
Basically, the idea is that I think often tend to focus on the negative bits, either in our personal futures, or I think also in the futures of civilization at large, if we even think about them. And instead, I think about thinking why it would be so bad if certain things happen. It could be also really good to think about the counterfactual. For example, I think death really is such a tragedy because life, on the other hand, is so amazing. And that holds for our individual lives, but it also holds for civilization and life at large. So on a more personal level, it has kind of two facets. So it really, I think, really since I can almost remember, or like one of my first memories really is that this, not like longing to not die, and I really. Like since I was a child, I could never really understand why that wasn't on everyone's minds all the time. That just the sheer fact that life is so amazing, and wouldn't it be great if we had more of it for more people? And wouldn't it be amazing if we could continue the amazing projects that many of us are taking on. And so I think to come to terms with that, I started exploring philosophy a lot, and through that, mostly existentialism. And existentialism has this, I think, somewhat useful angle of trying to, just really look at the finitude of life, right? And seeing like, okay, what kind of meaning can we create even in the finite constraints of our lives? And I think that was useful somewhat. You had Camus with the myth of Sisyphus. We should still consider us as happy people, even if we roll the stone up the hill, and we know it always falls down. So all of our projects will ultimately, become meaningless on a larger scale. And I thought that was somewhat comforting, but not all the way, right? And then through that, luckily, I eventually discovered transhumanist philosophy at first, and through that, I discovered really philosophy of science and technology as a larger field, in the way of like, hey, look, instead of taking our boundaries of a limited life as given and trying to create meaning within those more arbitrary boundaries, there's a community of people that are actually seeking to push those boundaries and seeking to create larger visions for humanity and actually making them real. And I think this holds true for both on a longevity angle, but also really very much for civilization at large, right? I think that oftentimes we think in terms of our current limitations, and even if things seem bleak on a momentary level, right? I think looking out there and just grasping the sheer sense of what's possible is utterly mind-boggling. And I think by focusing on that more, it would yield tremendous benefits.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And while you were, telling this fascinating story, I was actually thinking about a study that I have read a few years ago. The study was focused on identifying how the mindset, positive or negative, would affect people's decision making, and it was actually measured in the level of IQ points. Even though IQ points are not considered a very reliable method of measuring the intelligence, but what's interesting that the people who were like depressed because of certain circumstances in life, their level of IQ dropped by 13 or even 14 points, which stands for the difference between a scholar and a PhD candidate. So that's quite a huge difference. And if you think about it on a wider range, you can see that if you can improve decision making just by staying positive, it means that you will be most likely able to achieve more and build a better future for yourself and for those around you, compared to the future that you can build if you are depressed and minus 14 IQ points at once because of that.
Yes, and I want to say, it's not that I think that everyone should want this, right? But I think oftentimes what people misunderstand about this quest is that it is not that anyone is trying to oppose anything onto everyone here at all. It just, I think it is kind of unfortunate that we say at least that we care about freedom to choose and about our freedoms into most aspects in our life, but not in the aspect that is the foundation for many of the aspects of the other freedoms to matter, and that is on whether or not we want to continue to live. So I think it has to go out both ways, right? I think opting out should be an option. I think opting for longer life should be an option, and so it's not that there should be an imposition on anyone, and those who really for whom that is not an attractive option. Like that is certainly an availability, but I think that it is to some extent, creating more freedoms further down the line. And so I think focusing on this freedom at first, it has strong multiplier effects for everything that people could want in the future. And so at least for me, it is something that I think is worthwhile doing.
Yeah, absolutely. This part about freedom is incredibly important. And also, I think we don't really discuss public concerns as much as probably we should, just to make sure that we remove those obstacles in people's minds. Sometimes those obstacles have absolutely no ground, like, for instance, the fears related to, say, overpopulation, or that the drugs are going to be available only for the rich. A lot of the longevity drugs that are currently in development, it's very likely that they're going to be quite affordable, and people will be able to buy it in literally any pharmacy after the period of the very first stage of development, when it's probably going to be more expensive to compensate for the efforts that were invested in developing and testing the drug. But I also think that one of the factors that is affecting the perception of healthy life extension ideas is that we also rarely discuss the positive sides of it. And I don't necessarily mean direct positives like better health or longer life, but positive changes that we can experience as a human civilization in the long term. And so I wanted to ask you, after the multiple Foresight sessions focused on rejuvenation biotechnology, what are the key benefits that you feel are the most valuable to discuss in this regard?
One thing that I personally realized, I guess, was that when starting to think that it could be possible for humans to live longer, I think the second thought that everyone has immediately is, well, that doesn't really work if civilization won't be around, right? And so I think that an interesting thing here is that you immediately have a larger outlook on life. And first I thought, well, maybe my wish for living longer is just a puberty version almost of a larger version of a life as a thing in itself to continue. And I think that's certainly true. But now I've become more and more to think that it's also true the other way around, so that there's a two-way road, in the sense that by working on longevity and by hastening and by bringing about escape velocity and longevity, we can actually solve many of the other existential risks that we are worried about. And with solving, I don't mean we will have solved them in a moment, but we are creating a strong multiplier effect for us to work on them. Why do I think that? Well, I think that we would like to think of ourselves altruistically enough to think about the very long future, but ultimately we are not always at our best, right? And I think that there was Haldane who worked on the mathematics of kin selection, who said something like he joked that he would be willing to lay down his life for 2 brothers or 8 cousins, right? And I think that is like that is one way to look at it, but I think it also holds true intergenerationally, right? If you think about, you're probably willing to sacrifice a lot for your kids, you're probably willing to sacrifice a lot for your grandkids, but then the further you go down the line, how much are you actually willing to sacrifice for the next generations, for those after and for those after that? And so I think the further you go, the more impersonal it becomes. And so I think that by bringing about escape velocity and longevity, and actually feeling that we can continue to exist, you're creating an incredible skin in the game that is an effect that is really not to be underestimated. Because I think that even if we like to say that we care in altruistic terms, this is an effect that picks even those folks up who would not care otherwise about a long-term future for civilization. And so I think rather than just framing our quest in terms of quality-adjusted life years saved by just focusing on aging, which is already a really great thing in itself, even if you just care about people alive today, I think even if you care about future generations, actually making sure that people have skin in the game is a really great aspect. And I'm not saying we're perfect at it. I still discount my future self somewhat, right? We all do that to some extent. And maybe that's rational, right? Because we have more local knowledge about what benefits us now. But I'm just saying that if you care about the long-term future, making it really easy for others to care too could have major implications, I think, for the way that even Prisoner's Dilemma currently are solved right now. Yep.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. I often think to myself, why those around me who do not share the ideas of healthy life extension are willing to sacrifice their lives even now, by living a lifestyle that is hurting their health. If right now we're already considering the future where we are going to have such enormously long lives. So in my view, when you live only to say 80 years old, right, the amount of time that you sacrifice, the amount of achievement that you sacrifice is limited. But if you think about several hundred of years, several thousands of years, then will you be willing to sacrifice the same thing? For me, an important factor is also, the acquisition of intelligence, of additional knowledge, of wisdom. I'm 42 and I cannot really say that I'm a very progressed human being. I mean, I would definitely like to have more time to learn more things, to have another profession, to try myself, to travel, to do a lot of other stuff that I am not capable of doing right now, just because I'm there, only here where I am. But having those additional decades of life is like something that reduces the stress that I have. Currently, I'm struggling. I'm always making choices between something and something. I'm very interested in music. I really would like to be a composer. I mean, on a regular, as my regular activities, I really like music. I spent 10 years in musical school, but I have never proceeded with this kind of career. Yet I feel that my soul is suffering. I really want that, but I don't have the time for it. But if we develop Rejuvenation Biotechnologies, then I will not have to choose between those things because I will have time for all of them. It ties down with the concept of deliberate practice, right? To master any kind of activity, you need around 10,000 hours invested in this activity. And generally it happens over a period of several years at the very least. So imagine that I have more slots of those several years that I can invest and master something. So
yeah, I mean, I think that if you look at it, I think people often tend to look at their life as a narrative arc of like, one story with like, some kind of inflection point, and then it kind of tapers off and goes to a happy ending, or hopefully happy ending. But, and this also doesn't come from me, but if you think more of your life as like a book with many short stories, right, there would be so many different, different types of chapters that you would want to have even within the short story. And then the whole life as a whole could entail many, many more of those short stories. And I think that, sticking with the metaphor of books for a second, I think to me, it really just occurred to how much is available. When I remember as a child, there was a time when I made a list of all of the books I really wanted to read. And I thought that I could probably just go through them in a few years. And then obviously, as you start reading, more books come on the list. And meanwhile, also more books get written. And so that's the first time when it occurred to me that it's really unlikely that one lifetime will be enough for the books I want to read. And then obviously that moment that you realize that you also realize that there's not only books to read, but there's many, 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 many other things to do. And very likely over the course, also other things, even like other categories of things, even invented, that you could then also become great at. And so it just seems like that 80 or 90 years is an arbitrary number for wanting to go through all of this. And I'm not saying that, it cannot ever be exhausted. Maybe it will be, but it's just that I think that with the current limits, it's unlikely that by that time, we will get through the things that we would like to do ideally. And I think the same applies for civilization at large as well, right? If you look on a civilizational timeline, we have really just only become intelligent. We have barely, the wits to, as a civilization, even remain alive. And so I think just we're peeking around the corner. Many folks are gearing up for space, at least exploration at the moment, right? Like, I mean, after the 50-year lag, somehow now it's happening again. And so I think it would be really a shame if on a civilizational level, we stop now. And I think that, again, not everyone has to want this at all, but we're just getting started on a civilization level, right? Like brain-computer interfaces, I know that they still sound sci-fi, but people are working on them. Space exploration, people are working on them. There is so much potential available, and we have only discovered even that there is potential on a civilizational scale, that I think it would be really premature if we destroy ourselves now, either individually or really as a civilization at large. So I think, again, it holds both ways, right? There's no civilization without humans alive, but there's also no humans alive without the civilization at large. So
I would like to know more about the strategy for accelerating longevity therapeutics development that you are currently trying to pursue at Foresight Institute. Can you please share a little bit more about, the current projects that you have?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So I guess the first one is really, we have this group that I think is already creating what I sometimes call like the corridor at conferences between conferences, so where the work actually gets done and where the conversations actually happen. And so, it's really like a kind of like living, breathing container that, because of the virtual world, just continues to grow. People get onboarded. Like I interview about 2 people per day, and we really can't obviously all take them on, but we try to gradually onboard, so we remain high trust while we onboard new investors, entrepreneurs, scientists into the container. Then I think we this year we had a fellowship, and so and then also growing into an accelerator, because many of the projects are actually at a stage where really just they can hit the ground running. And so while usually I think the whole entire group already helps each other a lot, we have a few projects that we pick out that we kind of like give that we think are especially high promising, and that we hook up with mentors in the field. Much of that can be found on our program website. But we have 2 fantastic projects here already, which is Jean-Albert from the Albert Einstein School of Medicine and his project on brain cell replacement. And then Daniel Eve from Shift just gave an incredible presentation on his work on really driver clocks for rejuvenation. So, those are, I think, just 2 tokens. And I'm saying this because, in the next year, I think we will focus much more on keeping the container flowing, but then also really supporting individual projects that are seeking stronger mentorship support, that are already working. And this is kind of the crux on really hastening escape velocity and longevity. So I think usually what Foresight is good at taking on are the projects that may still be a little bit too high risk, high reward, or too niche, maybe for other organizations to take on. And so, if you're working on something that is out there, but that has a chance at succeeding and would really make a difference, if it does, we may be the right venue for you, and you could find it interesting to become a fellow. I cannot say this without also pointing out the really just like nothing less but inspiring number of projects that are currently popping up in the ecosystem. It's really a real blessing. And I mean, we have Nathan Cheng's really longevity fellowship that is onboarding people from a really large funnel, and it's fantastic mentors there as well. And I think starting up very soon, we have a longevity hackathon going on very soon. There's a Vita DAO, which is trying to do more of a blockchain based approach to longevity. So it's basically a very stakeholder friendly approach. So if you really want to get involved, then that may be the right structure. So there's lots of really exciting work in this space. And I think why that is now is because maybe this is my first best guess. You can correct me or like give me your own view of why you think that is. But I think it's a conglomeration of 3 factors that have recently kicked off that now makes work now very high impact. And so and they are all kind of a blessing in disguise, COVID related. So first, obviously, biotech has exploded, thanks to really vaccine development and thanks to the boost thereof, the mRNA vaccine, total like magic, really. And plus also because the regulatory ecosystem has become a little bit more friendly towards biotechnology progress, and people, I think, in general, since they saw the really just incredible success of the vaccines. So I think biotech has generally sped up. And I think generally that connection between aging and the risk factors that you have with most other things have become very obvious with COVID, right? So I think first one, biotech. Second one is the AI boost that we have. Really exciting. Also somewhat COVID conditional onto COVID, because many folks actually moved into cyberspace, right? And so software was one of the really big also factors that wasn't negatively impacted by a lockdown, in the sense that developers can mostly work from everywhere, machine learning and researchers the same. So I think software really just like sped up and became our second almost like skin during this time. So I think that the kind of progress in AI, which really, if you think about AI, it's intelligence, which is a multiplying factor for every other problem. So I think that intersection between biotech and AI, really exciting, and lots of things are coming out of that. Especially, for example, a topic that I'm super interested in is privacy preserving machine learning, because many people have, during COVID, during the biotech boom, started tracking their health, for example, Oura Ring, whatnot. And so if you could have a way in which you could apply privacy preserving machine learning to that data, and then more people could share in, and it would just become much more obvious. You could collect more data. You wouldn't really have to so much, rely on very expensive trials anymore. Maybe it would be enough to do that individually, at least at first. So it would unlock a whole silo of data that otherwise is really hard to share. And so then the last boost that I want to mention, or the last factor, is crypto. And I really think that, if you look at the crypto boom, right, that happened in December, and really just many of the coins doubling or more, right, that must make a difference, in the sense that I think that people interested in that space, they are already comfortable in thinking thoughts that may, not be supported by much of society yet. And so they're already used to thinking outside of the box a little bit. And so with many of those people now coming into a more financially secure and even just financially very potentially generous position, I think combining and onboarding more folks in this area into this quest, because many of them, frankly, they already get it. There's not really much messaging to do. So I think the convergence of those three factors, super exciting for the space right now. And I think that we need to do a better job at pointing out where they're onboarding people really on an individual level and allowing them to become part of this ecosystem, making them really feel a part of it. And then B, usually what happens with every boom, and maybe also with the current boom, is that there'll be a hype cycle. So there will be, in 3 years, there'll be a time when things don't work out the way that some people promised, and interest in the field will wither. Hopefully at that point we won't have very much snake oil. So I think what I mentioned before of the ecosystem is, I think, quite special because many people have been in it for a long time. So hopefully we find a mechanism by which we can at least hold each other accountable, so that those tapering offs in the hype cycle aren't accelerated or aren't strained too much by the fact that much snake oil got sold. So I think that just doing due diligence and making sure that people can have real conversations, that even conflict of interest that definitely exists when companies are around isn't too much of a problem, I think is really useful. And so I think it's really on all of us. There's much work to be done, but also incredible projects that are happening. And I think, sorry, one last thing, more coordination also around our groups would be great, right? I mean, you have a fantastic, incredible community. We're getting started with one. There's lots of others, not only space-based, but also really virtual now. So maybe really making getting a point at mixing those communities and just really growing an ecosystem together on the long run, so that people can coordinate more on the longer term goals. The money that is needed is still a lot, right? And sometimes it's useful to know that others do it too. And that, maybe you can even coordinate on the really, really big goals together, and say, look, we are going to fund this area over here if you focus on this. So actually having conditions on your funding would be really great. So over the long run, I hope that we can tackle the really, really, really high hanging fruits together that require more coordination, high trust, larger sums of money. And I think, you're definitely in the process of building this, and many others are too. And so I think just continuing to plow away and coordinating more would be great.
Wow, that was a shower of great ideas. Thank you so much for sharing your view on those. Actually, I agree with you a lot when it comes to COVID situation accelerating the field of biotechnology, but I also have 3 more factors that I believe lead to the accumulation of steam and us being very close to the breaking point when Rejuvenation Biotechnology is going to be seen by the society at large as something really serious, interesting, and useful. I think 3 more factors that I would mention. First, the number of scientists working on the problem. Since the publication of the hallmarks of aging in the early paper by Overdegree, obviously, there were many more people interested in this field because they started to realize that this is something real. This is okay to work on extending healthy human life and eventually beating the diseases of aging. And they started to get into the field and work on the problem. And the number of scientists that are currently involved, I believe that it grew significantly over the last years. And obviously, this leads directly to having many more scientific publications to be released. Another factor concerns how people get interested, and also the problem of snake oil a little bit too. So say even 10 years ago, there were not so many wearable devices, and generally medical devices that can be used at home that people could have access to, right? So, but right now, even a simple fitness tracker can track so many things in relation to your health, and you can get yourself a tool to say measure the glucose level in your blood, some other parameters. And then again, right now we're in this very interesting phase when there is a lot of diagnostic labs, and they are offering huge panels of biomarkers for a relatively affordable price. And that actually leads to a very interesting thing. So if before we had to think hard and analyze scientific literature when we wanted to understand if something is a snake oil or not, right now you can just make the tests before, take the treatment, make the tests after, and see if it's snake oil for yourself or not. And that changes a lot. And that's actually, I am very enthusiastic about it, because I started to notice that, say, biotechnology companies currently working on drugs or supplements for aging, they themselves started offering the tests as one of the services to the clients that are buying their product. And that, for me, is a marker of a very well thought approach to, to build in trust with the early adopters of those therapies, and eventually with all other people who will come after them. The snake oilers cannot really do such a thing. They may offer, but they after measuring the results before and after, you can see what happens, right? If the therapy doesn't work, if the supplement doesn't work, and people don't see any changes to their biological age. And by the way, measuring your biological age, even through the epigenetic clocks, right? It's currently quite affordable. You can already start doing this. And here you don't see any changes, then why to take this particular treatment? And that means that the companies that have good medical practice, good research practices, they are going to be at the advantage compared to the companies that are offering some sort of snake oil. And eventually those offering snake oil may find themselves without any sort of income and die off quite naturally, which will be a good thing for the community, because nobody wants that. We want real longevity, not a fake one.
Yes, and again, I think that privacy preserving machine learning here could really move the dial, because imagine if you do that with yourselves, you need a lot of time with a lot of experiments. Some things don't pan out for a long time, and you may be a very particular case, but you could definitely speed up your insight into all of those biomarkers. Really, if you had more folks working on it, and if you were able to benefit from their data and their particular, idiosyncratic conditions that they're in as well. So totally agree, and I think that much more, could even be possible if we found a way to collaborate more on this.
Is there a message that you would like to send to the attendees of our conference? Maybe some advice, maybe some call to action, what to do to accelerate the development of rejuvenation biotechnologies?
Well, there's lots of scientific areas that you can explore. So for the scientists out there, just like maybe our fellowship is something new for you, maybe someone else's fellowship is, just go out and look at it, contact people, they're probably willing to help. But then on a larger level, it's a really peculiar time. Like from my local angle, at least, it's now suddenly okay. And I think that's because of the convergence of biotech, AI, and crypto to talk really openly in a much more open setting than before about escape velocity. People are like, I think we're at the point where maybe people can already tip in, and where it may become psychologically safe for others to join, or because of the crusade. So just exploring lightly, with others around you, why you think that's a good idea. Obviously not pressuring anyone to do anything that they actually, by their preferences, really don't want to do. But I think it's a good time. We can aim much, much higher. Like I oftentimes, when I go back into Foresight's archives, Foresight has existed for 35 years. Back in the days, people were like so ambitious on longevity, right? Like we have it in our founding documents, in the book that like founded Foresight and so forth. And people really predicted much shorter time horizons on getting us to escape velocity. And then nothing happened for a long time. And I feel like we're finally on the cusp again. And so really leveraging the moment and making it easy for people to ask stupid questions and to just join would be really fantastic. I think it is a pretty special time, and so much is on the line. Even I think if reading Nick Bostrom's Fable of the Dragon Tyrant, like even moving the needle by 1 year has huge implications for the benefit of life. Hastening escape velocity longevity by 1 year, drawing it closer to by 1 year is incredible. And so and doing that, I think, has big effects. If you want to get kind of like a feel of all of the different things that the future could entail that I think are positive, I have a website, existentialhope.com, which is mostly a volunteer-run effort by which I try to collect lots of different links in aging and neurotech, in nanotechnology, in space development, just about why the future is exciting. So if you want to kind of dip your feet in there, then that may be a cool website to check out. And yeah, I'm just super happy we are alive at the moment, and I think I think it's a good time.
Wonderful. Well, Allison, thank you so much for joining me today. That was an awesome conversation. Thank you for sharing all your numerous insights and advice concerning various aspects of accelerating the development of longevity technologies. Well, then stay healthy, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. See you in the chat.